Hello, I'm David Harrington, President and CEO of Center for Neuro Skills.
And I'm Gary Seale, Regional Director of Clinical Services at the Center for Neuro Skills.
And this is a Center for Neuro Skills podcast. And in this episode, we're taking a very important aspect of brain injury recovery that is sometimes underappreciated, and that is the role of positive emotion. And my friend and colleague, Dr. Gary Seale, is the perfect person to have here to take us on this journey.
Thanks, David. I've been a student of positive psychology practices and the relationship between positive emotion and disease prevention and recovery following illness and injury. So I'm really passionate about this and really excited to be with you today. The World Health Organization and the Institute of Medicine have long realized the impact of environments on the expression of disability. And environments can either be enabling or disabling. And oftentimes we focus on the architectural environment, the physical environment. For example, if a building in the community does not have a curb cut or a ramp, handrails, those kinds of things, it is very disabling for a person with a mobility impairment. However, if you add in those components like curb cuts and ramps and automatic door openers and grab bars, now that is a very enabling environment. The person with a mobility impairment can take advantage of and participate in whatever's going on in that venue. Likewise, what we don't often focus on is the psychological environment. And psychological environments can also be enabling or disabling. So, how people perceive the injury, how they adjust to it, how they use their strengths to overcome, can have a huge impact on their outcome and their eventual recovery from a brain injury.
So, Gary, before we get into the heart of the episode, can we start by just defining a couple terms? What do you really mean about the positive and negative emotions? And can you really talk to really when we're feeling those emotions, what's going on in the brain?
Sure, sure. So, positive emotions include things like curiosity, gratitude is a very powerful positive emotion, joy, interest, contentment. All of these are positive emotions. And when we experience them, there is a release of dopamine in the brain, which is a part of our reward system, as well as endorphins and enkephalons. These are feel good hormones in the brain. And when we are in a positive emotional state, research shows that we actually process information faster and more accurately. So it opens up the areas of our brain, all the learning centers of our brain light up, and we are able to collaborate, be creative in our problem solving and solution to whatever is facing us. And research also shows that when we experience positive emotions regularly, it has a huge impact on our immune system. So it promotes health and prevents disease. Conversely, when we experience negative emotions like anger and fear, worry, it actually triggers the fight or flight response, which is again a neurotransmitter hormonal cascade that prepares us to run, hide, freeze, or fight. So it's often called the amygdala hijack. So we're cut off from the thinking, creative part of our brain, and we're really operating on midbrain. And because that fight or flight response releases those hormones and neurotransmitters that get us ready to fight or run or hide, it can crank up our cardiovascular system. It can slow our digestion. It can disturb our sleep. And all of those things are risk factors primarily for stroke. So it can be disease causative if we experience those negative emotions regularly and trigger that fight or flight response.
Well, Dr. Steele, that certainly resonates with me as I look back through the last week and, moments of being positive and negative, I can definitely see where that has an impact on me. But those negative emotions, of course, are common after brain injury. Given what you and I do, we see this frequently among our patients and even their families. And when we consider people who, with brain injury, are often at risk of significant impairments, particularly if they're not treated by the right people at the right time, it affects the entire person's life, everything from walking to talking to thinking through things that has major functional implications from doing something basic like showering or cooking a simple meal, all the way to something more complex like driving, caring for your kids, going grocery shopping. And of course, those roles or those tasks kind of build up to our roles as providers, mothers, fathers, students, whatever that role might be. And these functional limitations, I know from our patients, they're coupled with fear, the loss of autonomy, the dependency, and so on. And again, not just the patient, but the entire family. And I've seen patients and families navigate this, um, given my course of 30 years in neuro rehab. And it just seems like the attitude really does make a big difference. So negative emotions are certainly common following brain injury.
You're absolutely right. Research shows, and our patients and families verify this when we talk to them. About 50% of individuals will experience clinically significant levels of anxiety and or depression in the first year following injury. And again, as you say, when brain injury can impact and negatively affect all areas of our life: physical, emotional, cognitive, and so that's a big disruption. There's a lot of uncertainty about the future, and so that uncertainty, that negative emotion, can um, impact a person's ability to fully participate in rehabilitation. And so we really have to recognize and address those negative emotional states early on and treat it aggressively.
Well, for all of you who are listening, Dr. Seale is one who measures and likes to research, it's no surprise that you've delved into this area. You know this area very well. You personally investigated this question and how emotions impact recovery. Can you tell us a little bit, Dr. Seale, about what you did?
Sure. So, a couple of colleagues of mine and I at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston conducted a research study a few years ago, and we were interested in the impact of positive emotion on recovery following stroke. We knew from previous research that positive emotion is associated with recovery, but most of the research just looked at positive emotion at one time point and early on after recovery. And so we were curious, does positive emotion change over time? And if it does, what does that trajectory do in terms of promoting recovery? So we recruited 11 inpatient rehab facilities across 8 states in the US. And our initial sample was a little over 1,200 individuals. And these are elderly individuals, 55 and greater, who had experienced a stroke. And we wound up with a sample at the end of the study of almost 800 patients. So it was a rather large sample. Um, we collected information on positive and negative emotion at the beginning of the study, as well as some injury characteristics and demographics. And our outcome measure was the familiar FIM, the functional independence measure, looking at, again, recovery after brain injury. And so we collected data at 3 time points: admission, right at discharge, 3 months, and 12 months. So we followed these individuals for a full year. And what we found was that the majority of individuals experienced a positive or an increase in experience of positive emotion. About 42% of the sample actually experienced, a greater positive emotion over that first year. About 36% remained the same, and about 22% unfortunately declined. Their experiences of positive emotion actually declined over time. And what we found was those individuals who increased in their experience of positive emotion or stayed the same had a much better functional recovery. Their FIM scores were much higher at the end of the first year than those individuals who declined in their experience of positive emotion.
Well, Dr. Steele, you set that study up so well, and it really kind of defies some of the emotions that are out there in terms of, do people really change? Can they change their emotions? The study is definitely has a positive impact on brain injury recovery, and that's interesting to learn about. But bridging kind of what we've learned in that study to actual life, some have an idea that people are born happy or not, and so we can't really increase positive emotion with our actions is the common thing. Can you kind of riff on that a little bit?
Sure. And so, a good research study actually creates more questions than it answers. And we have the same question. So if positive emotion can change over time, are there things that we can do to increase a person's experience of positive emotions and perhaps have an impact on the trajectory of their recovery? And so we looked through the literature, and a researcher named Jonathan Haidt, Haight, in his publication called "The Happiness Hypothesis," answered that question, and he found that about 50% of our dispositional optimism, or the glass half full, is our genetics and the home we grew up in. About 10% can be affected by our current circumstances, although I'm a believer that we can always change our circumstances. But what he found was a full 40% of variables that can change our experience of positive emotion are under our control. So positive emotion, our experience of it, is modifiable. There are things we can do to increase our experience of those positive emotions.
Well, this is absolute critical information. Now, often when I'm giving tours here at Center for Neuro Skills, people like to see the physical, occupational therapy, a lot of movement. And when we go around and to the counseling department, this is one of the most important departments that we have. We have counselors who can focus on the patient's emotional state and really begin to flip some of those negative emotions to positive ones. And it's important for our counselors to be able to help our patients develop those positive coping mechanisms when uh, they're going to have a tendency to be negative given the life changes and the adjustment that they're going through. And part of what we do is reframing the thoughts. I've learned this over the course of the years. I'm a much more positive person, just knowing how to reframe things. I told my son not too long ago, my success in life is built on a mountain of failures. All of those things have contributed to learning and growing and developing. And if not for the challenges, how would I have become the person I am? And so I think that reframing is really important. And, one of the people who comes to mind is a gentleman named Leroy McClure. He is one of our patients who we treated in Dallas. I had the opportunity to even meet with him last week, and just an absolute inspiring person who, after his stroke, struggled initially with not wanting counseling. He wasn't a big counseling person before his injury, but boy, the impact of counseling had on him and really set a course for his recovery, but not only his recovery, but what he did with everyone around him. And I'd just like to share that video of Leroy McClure.
Despite the fact that I was in very good shape, I never had any issues with my health. We discovered that my stroke was a birth defect. It's called AVM, arterial venous malformation, the bleeding of the brain. And it was a new discovery for us. My name is Leroy McClure Jr. I have 4 children. I have 8 grandchildren and a beautiful wife. Pre-stroke, I was the founder and CEO of a public charter school for over 20 years at several charter schools. And prior to that, I was a language therapist, a certified academic language therapist, which meant I worked with children that had difficulty with reading and writing, people with dyslexia and ADD and ADHD, smart people but had difficult time succeeding in the public school system. I enjoy working out. I've been working out for over 45 years. Working out means going to the gym every day, 5 days a week, hour and a half to 2 hours a day. In fact, I was in the gym when I had my stroke. I was finishing up a workout on a Friday, and I recognized I was having a headache. Small headache, but it was a headache, and it wasn't a regular headache. So I asked a young man to follow me to the water fountain. Once I went to the water fountain, as I was drinking water, I was talking to him, and my speech started slurring. Once my speech started slurring, I knew something was wrong. So I asked him to call 911. When he called 911, they came and took me to the hospital, and I was in Neuro ICU for 21 days. And that was the beginning of me having a stroke. When I came here for an interview, one of the therapists told me I could walk. She said, "You know you can walk." I said, "No, I can't." And she said, "Stand up." Now I could stand up and sit down, but walking, I've never walked. So she said, "Walk with me." So she grabbed me by the hand and had one of her bodyguards. I thought they were a bodyguard, but it was one of the big guys in physical therapy. They were behind me just in case if I fell. She said, "Walk with me." And so we walked for about 100 feet. And but I was very unsteady, and mentally I wasn't ready to walk. And so they built my legs up over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then I got on a walker, and next thing you know, I was walking. And I asked one of them, "Now, if I walked more, would I be able to walk better?" They said, "The more you walk, the better you'll get." Now, why did they tell me that? Now, at lunchtime, I would walk around this place, and even in the morning when we got here at 8:30, I'll walk from 8:30 to 9. I was doing 8 to 10,000 steps a day. And I even started a walking club, Leroy's Walking Club, encouraging other people to walk, because I see people who can walk, but they're sitting down. The feeling of not being able to walk is tough. It blows you away because, you know, simple things. You want to go over there and pick something up. You can't. You got to rely on someone. That's hard. But once I started walking, I put the wheelchair down, and I never looked back. And so far, I have walked over 3 million, taken over 3 million steps. I'm against counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, at least for me. Somebody else can take them, but not for me. But one of the best things that happened for me was to have a counselor here. They helped me put everything in the right perspective. I was trying to figure things out all by myself, and I was using my old mind, the mind I used to have, you know, such as first thing I wanted to know was when I'm gonna get back to normal. I want to hurry up and get out of here. I'm gonna be out of here in 3 months. My wife said, "Lee, take your time. You have one job, get well. If it takes you 2 or 3 years, so be it." And I'm saying to myself, she doesn't know. I'm gonna get out of here in 3 or 4 months. 3 or 4 months came. I wasn't even anywhere close to getting out of here. Then I started focusing on, why am I in a hurry? Where do I have to go? I don't have a place to go. You know, I work for myself, and I allowed my wife and my daughter to take over the company. So it wasn't like I have to hurry up and get back to work. And I now have a new normal, and I'm very grateful for my new normal. And I put so much emphasis on trying to hurry up and get out of here that I recognized my blessing was the longer I stayed here, the better I got, and the more people I was able to help. I'm enjoying getting to know myself, getting to recognize, despite how good I think I am, I have some flaws. So here's an opportunity for me to reset. You know, I'm slowing myself down now. I'm enjoying spending time with myself, spending time with my wife. I've been married for 27 years now, 25 years prior to my stroke, and I had a good marriage too. But the last 2 years, my marriage has been even better. I would say because I've slowed down. So I'm gonna enjoy this as much as I can. And once I see it's time to do more, I will. But right now, I'm enjoying my life. My life is good. CNS is really a bridge for a meaningful recovery. And I'm an example of that.
Well, we here at CNS, we were so honored to be able part of Leroy's life. I mean, you heard him talk about being the CEO of a public charter school for 20 years, a certified language therapist, a wonderful marriage, and in an instant lose that role of business owner, executive, provider, and he just struggled. And a lot of people in that situation would have a lot of negative emotions, and he is the example of positive emotion. And it's not only the 8,000 to 10,000 steps that he walked every day, it's his outcome, his outlook. And to the point where he had Leroy's Walking Club, that he enveloped other people in that positivity and really truly made a big difference. So counseling is critical and the impact of positive emotion on recovery. And we're grateful for him.
Yeah, what a great story. Unfortunately, I'm glad Leroy said something about counseling's not for me. I'm okay. I don't need that. I think a lot of people still confuse counseling with um, people who may have serious mental illness. But we've already talked about all of the changes and the adjustments and the uncertainty and the disruption, and that happens to a person's life after an injury. And so counseling can help individuals deal with that. One of the other things Leroy said that I think is very important too is that he felt dependent on others. He had a difficulty asking for and accepting help, and so that's another one of those positive coping mechanisms that our counselors teach: is that it's okay to ask for and receive help. So again, counseling is just really a great way to help people navigate all of those changes. And part of the counseling focus is understanding who the person was pre-injury. We all have an identity that's built around the social groups we're a part of, our life experiences, the things that we're good at, our strengths, all our roles that maybe husband, father, worker, breadwinner, business owner, and the clinician, not just a counselor, but all the clinicians took time to understand Leroy's identity, who he was pre-injury, and what he wanted to get back to, and help him return to those things that brought meaning and engagement in his life. What a great story.
It certainly is. And Dr. Seale, I mean, wouldn't you say that there's a delicate balance that we need to strike? A lot of our patients may not have awareness of their impairments or their functioning. And so part of the rehab process is making them aware of the change in function and in some ways having them come to terms with the loss of that independence or at least temporary loss of independence. But you don't really want to dwell on the negative emotions. And I think sometimes that can happen and it can definitely affect a person. And in an adverse way, in that they would have perhaps a victim mentality. And during the rehabilitation process, that emphasis should be on identifying and building upon individual strengths, personal growth, and boosting positive emotions. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, People who are positive or experience positive emotions are not positive all the time. We all experience, frustration and anger and sadness. Well, we don't stay there. It's okay to accept the fact that this situation is not ideal, and it's certainly not what I want or what I would have chosen. But we don't stay there, and there are techniques to help us move out of that and return to center, if you will, or a positive place. So, mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness is simply being completely focused in the present, right now, not worrying about the past, not being anxious about the future, but being mindful in the moment. And there are a number of activities that we help patients engage in to just bring them into the moment. There's positive savoring. One of the ways that we experience positive emotions through the senses. So savoring a meal, being in awe of a sunrise or a sunset, letting positive memories return to us when we hear a piece of music from our high school prom or whatever it may be. So there are a number of techniques that we can deploy. One also is resilience-based exercises. So we've all been through things, right? And we have found a way to overcome the challenge. And so helping people see their stroke or their brain injury as a challenge to overcome, and have them look back at a time when they faced a challenge in their past and overcame, and encouraging and letting patients know that they still have that right stuff still in them, and they can draw on it and use it as part of their recovery. And finally, we focus on strengths. Um, it's very easy to look at what is wrong or what is broken or what is damaged, and that's sort of what traditional medical models do. But looking more at, what are the strengths? What are the residual strengths that remain? How can we use the strengths to overcome, get around, compensate um, for the consequences of the injury? So helping people understand, appreciate their strengths, and use them to overcome.
Well, Gary, I love what you said, and in fact, I'm part of a business group that we did a lifeline, we really mapped out our life in terms of our circumstances, our emotion, and our spiritual life through life stages, different events. And what was interesting, at least what I saw in my data, is that there was emotional change, but my faith increased. And during the times of challenge, were followed by heightened improvement, and which set a course then for building upon the character and the strengths that I feel like I have today, and that I'm going to continue to build on. And one of our colleagues, Dr. Andriata, she and I were talking about our signature strengths and how do we leverage that. And it's a fresh way of looking at things and how do we kind of build upon this. So whether you have a brain injury or not, all of this stuff is absolutely applicable, but it's certainly something we need in the rehab process. We saw some of these methods in Leroy's story, but there's also another great example from Gwen Jackson, who also had a stroke. And I'd just like to cue this video up.
My name is Gwendolyn Jackson. I am receiving my therapy at CNS in Houston, Texas. It's been like a whirlwind for me. Before I had my stroke, I was a case manager. I housed homeless individuals in Houston. But 2 years ago, when COVID hit, I was diagnosed with COVID. From COVID, I found out I had cervical cancer. From cervical cancer, I had a stroke, had my first stroke. From my first stroke, I had a mild heart attack. From a mild heart attack, I was still fighting cancer. From that, I had this last stroke, and it was more severe than my first stroke. You have a young lady named Whitney that came in from Dallas, and I remember the first day she came in, and I was so afraid of falling. That was my fear. And she told me, she said, "Hey, you can do this. You have to believe in yourself. You still have it in here, but you got to believe you have it." She said, "I can't walk for you, but I can hold your hand, but I can't take the step for you." And I remember the first day that I actually took the step by myself out of the wheelchair. The staff and the other clients, when I first took my steps and I looked up, I was crying and all of them was crying with me. When I first went to counseling, I'm a case manager. I was like, oh, I went in there as a case manager. I went in there like, oh, I know how this looked. So I had to, it was kind of funny because I went in there like, you can't counsel me because I'm the case manager. And realized I needed counseling more than anybody. And it has really healed me. I think I use more Kleenex than anybody in counseling, but I really realized some things that I needed to be healed own in counseling. And I believe healing starts, now that I know, it starts from the inside out. And I found out I had anxiety, was dealing with depression because of all of this. Didn't even know it until I went to counseling. And I'm glad you guys have that. So now I'm trying to learn this new life. But I'm a grandmother, so what it have taught me, and it's the one thing that therapists do, they say in therapy, they say, smell the flowers and blow the candles. So it takes time in life. That's what we need to do. We spend so much time in life, what I have learned, we spend so much time in life doing things that's not really important, and we forget about the little bitty things, and it have taught me to appreciate the little bitty things. So I do now. I appreciate family. I appreciate little bitty things that we take for granted.
Yeah, Gwen is just another example of just positive emotion and how effective it is. You figure Dr. Seale, she had COVID, cancer, she had stroke, a mild heart attack, and of course she was a case manager, as she said, and of course she was the one who was most resistant to counseling. And then she realized that she needed counseling more than anyone else. And sometimes some of us healthcare providers, we're our own worst enemy. We think we know the path, but we need to rely on other people too. And I just, you worked with her. Do you have any additional thoughts?
Yeah, when you talk about that lifeline experience or lifeline exercise, Gwen is just a great example of resilience, right? So resilience is that term we borrow from engineering, looking at the properties of metals to bend but not break, and that was Gwen. She got knocked down a number of times in her life, and she just wouldn't quit. She kept getting back up and facing those challenges and moving forward. And so her lifeline experience was very positive. And again, I think she tapped into that while she was with us at CNS in Houston.
So inspiring. So, Gary, you spend so much time studying this. What are the tips that you can give all of us, brain injury or not, so that we can boost that 40% positive emotion that's under our direct control?
Sure. One of the ways to boost the positive is to reduce the negative. And I tell people all the time to really evaluate your media diet. There's so much out there that can discourage us or frighten us. And so try to move away from it. If you want to fast from something this week, just put your phone and turn your radio off and fast from media for a while and see if you don't feel better. The other is to get to gratitude. Gratitude is probably the most powerful of all the positive emotions. So focusing on things that are going well, things that you're proud of, accomplishments, big and small in your life, and write them down. Write a gratitude list down and review it regularly. Another is to just go out into nature. You breathe fresh air. We get a dose of vitamin D from the sun. We can be in awe of the creation, which is a very powerful positive emotion. And then finally, I encourage people to connect with something larger than yourself. We do these things called downward comparisons sometimes in counseling, where we ask people, instead of saying "I wish I blank," I'm glad I'm not. So rather than "I wish I had a bigger house," I'm glad I'm not homeless. And maybe thinking about the homeless in your community and doing something to help them. So being a part of something bigger than yourself. Those are all things that we can all do, brain injury or not.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So watch your media diet, gratitude, join a cause, and go into nature. Those are really great tips. So let's wrap up here, Dr. Seale. If you had to pick two top takeaways from this podcast, key things for listeners to remember, what would they be?
Okay. One is that the regular experience of positive emotions is disease preventative. If you can stay in that positive emotional state, it really will have a huge impact on your immune system, your health, and your well-being. The second thing is that our experience of those positive emotions, a lot of it is under our control. We can do the things that you just talked about, and be healthier and happier. And it is a lifestyle change, right? It's something we can rehearse and practice over time. And then be open to counseling. I think that that's another takeaway here. So many people, again, have misconceptions about it, but being open to it, it is a very powerful therapeutic tool.
Those are some powerful takeaways. Dr. Seale, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you, all the listeners out there, for being with us today. We had such a great time sharing this information that we feel passionate about.